Welcome back to another episode of Expedition 44. We are very glad to have you here. Today, Matt and I are very excited. Most of our regular watchers, listeners know that we absolutely love it to see women living out their God given ministry directives. And we have a gift in that area today. We have Reverend Dr. Nicole Massie Martin, who is the founder and executive director of Soulfire International Ministries. She's also serving as the chief operating officer at Christianity Today. Dr. Martin is the author of numerous articles, including 3 books. The one we're looking at today is Nailing It: Why Successful Leadership Demands Suffering and Surrender. Thank you for that, Matt. This is an IVP book. We always get excited about those. Made to Lead: Empowering Women for Ministry and Leaning In. I have not read that one. I'm going to put it at the top of my list now, as that is right down my alley. And then a third one, Letting Go, a Lenten Devotional. Dr. Martin is a graduate of Vanderbilt University, Princeton Theological Seminary, and Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary as well. She's married to her best friend, Dr. Mark Martin, and they have 2 amazing daughters. Thank you for joining us today. Like I said, we're super excited about this. Take a minute or two and, kind of catch us up with you. Tell us anything I might have left out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Will and Matt. It is an honor to be with you guys today. I love your podcast.
Thank you.
Um, let's see what though the book titles, the Lenten devotional is Leaning In, Letting Go. And then the other one, my first book was Made to Lead, Empowering Women for Ministry. So I'm especially excited to talk about Nailing It because it's all theology of the cross.
Mm.
We love that.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I absolutely love this book. I think I've read it twice in the last couple of days, like just skimmed
Wow.
through it. And like, as I was prepping some of the interview questions here, and I just think it's something that all pastors really need to read here and like put into
That's
practice.
great.
So we're both really excited about talking through this with you. Like we kind of talked about before, this is a little different than our normal
Yeah.
conversations that we have, and we're
Yeah.
really excited about it. Actually, we don't
To the
get into
point
a
that
lot
I
of.
actually don't know that we've ever done a regular book before, just so you
Wow.
know. Like, everything we do is like super nerdy theology that
Yeah.
no one's ever
Exegesis.
heard of before,
Yeah.
and like I would call this major mainstream. And so
Yeah.
like I was going to
Wow.
share, I'll share a little bit of the background. We have a
Yeah.
good relationship with IVP, and our
Yeah.
representative always says, "Hey, can you work these in?" And so we get all kinds of books from them, and
Yeah.
we always just say send them. We'll read them. Matt and I usually crush through these books in a couple hours. And I have to say, like at first, like I was thinking, yeah, this just isn't our cup of tea. And like
Yeah. Yeah.
Matt and I both read it and got back to each other within hours and said we've got
Wow.
to do this. Like this is
That means
something
so
that,
much.
even though it's not the directive that we're usually into, it's the same cultural river. It's King Jesus
Wow.
thinking. Like
Yes.
we've got to do whatever we can to help her
Yeah.
promote this.
Yeah.
That
We,
means so much. I thank you. Thank you so much.
yeah. Well, again, thanks so much for writing this. I think it's a really important book that pastors need to read. So, tell us a little bit about the focus of this book and why you wrote it.
Yeah. I am overwhelmed by the words that you shared. The writing process is so weird because you have this, moment with God and it's just like you and Jesus and you're sitting down, you're writing things out. And then there comes a time when you have to like release it into the world. And there's
Yeah.
this major thought in your mind. No one cares. No one's going to read this. It's not even going to matter. So to hear you say
Right.
that just really makes my whole day. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The reason why I wrote this book is because of several things. First, I saw how our dependence on the resurrection often came at the expense of crucifixion, and that would happen in sermons. Your best day is next. You're more than conquerors. God has conquered everything for you. Victory is on the way. And often that would never include and you have to take up your cross, and you may
Yeah.
walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and you may not always be healthy and whole and wise and prosperous. Sometimes you're going to be broke, sometimes you're going to be sick. So it just never seemed that our crucifixion understanding never wove itself into
Mhm.
the messages that I was hearing. The other reason why I wrote this book is because I started to see how this kind of uber triumphalism of society was weaving its way into theology, which was affecting the way we lead. I was seeing friends and leaders and others that I know saying things like, there are people on my team who are the weakest links and, they can't get it together. I was seeing more people check out on work because, I need a mental health day and I can't take care of my mom and my kids and show up for work. But it seemed that the teams they were a part of kind of ignored this reality. In fact, they were penalized for this reality. So I was trying to figure out, how do we reconcile a need for greater crucifixion in our theology that affects discipleship, that affects leadership? And also, how do we reconcile this broken world in which we live where people are stressed out and burdened and traumatized and they're not finding their place in the
Mhm.
church, in the
Yes.
job, and in the gospel?
Yeah.
That's great. You know, I put it like this a lot of times that we are, as Christians, we're going off a text that's 2000 to 3500 years old, and
Yep.
we're trying to interpret it as the intended audience were meant to interpret it, and then reapply it to something that, you know, is just the evolution of modern society. I mean, particularly in the last 100 years, but even in the last 2000 years from the context of when the New Testament was written, like it's hard to apply all of this
Yes.
stuff. And
Yes.
you start out kind of, I think logically summarizing what some of the issues are. And the one that
Mm-hmm.
really jumped out to me was empathy. And so
Mm-hmm.
lots of leadership conversations. I used to go to the Willow Creek Leadership Conference
Yeah.
every year for I think 25 years in a row, and was never really sure that it was accomplishing what it was set out to be. And a lot of it was because of empathetic conversations. And so I
Mm.
look back at that over the years, and today it's very controversial.
Yeah.
There's tons of books written on toxic empathy as it relates to the church and narcissism and all kinds of stuff. But wokeness kind of gets thrown into this bag of tricks
Yes.
as well. And I think that you walk through this really well. You present 7 myths. Can you kind of explain your a little bit of that dynamic of the modern age and how you see it all fitting together within more of a church context?
Yeah. This understanding of empathy is something that I am very nervous our society will lose in general. The more your
Hmm.
algorithm only speaks what you want to hear, the more your friendships in your community, in your neighborhood, in your church looks more like you, the lower your capacity will be to receive anyone else's narrative as true or anyone else's experience as valid. So the same is true when we're thinking about triumphalism in leadership. When you are only absorbed with a resurrection style leadership, then you think if someone is being crucified, then they're wrong and they need to go. If someone is struggling with their current situation, then they'll never be a good asset to our organization. And if I take the time to actually listen to someone rather than telling them what to do, then I myself am a weak leader. And it's just so sad because when you look at the stories of Jesus, he stops every time and
Hmm.
names or listens to the current situation.
Yeah.
He is a perfect exegetical expert of his culture. He recognizes the rooms that he's in. And that's why he's able to say, in the case of religious leaders, you brood of vipers. But in the case of, others who are maybe not as knowledgeable, come to me, you who are
Yeah.
weary and heavy laden. So he's able to diversify his message because he's listening, because he knows. And that is what I'm trying to say. Leaders need to be aware, not just empathic, but understand this is the way to lead by understanding where your people are so you can take them where they need to go.
Yeah, love that. As we continue into your book through the first part of it, you kind of look at and outline some of the problems. And specifically in chapter 2, you talked a little bit about triumphalism, about trauma, the American church. Maybe talk to us a little more about some of those concepts and how they're currently plaguing the church in America.
Mm. So it should never surprise us that the world will do what the world will do. I mean, the
Yep.
world is whirling.
Yep.
Like it's
Yep.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
we should never be surprised when we have people in government or political power acting crazy. It's the world. The challenge is when those types of principles weave themselves into the church. There's
Mm,
Hmm.
not a problem with us saying America's a beautiful country and it's a great way to be. And, there's the American dream in and of itself doesn't carry like a power to be good or bad per se. The challenge is when the American dream weaves in with American faith. And now I can get the good house and the good job because I follow Jesus. That's where we start to get
mm,
kind of twisted. I remember I was at a conference, this was in London, and the scholar, I believe, was from, oh, I want to say from Albania, but he was talking about the meaning of shalom. And he said he understood the true meaning of shalom, peace, as wholeness when he was on a hospital bed fighting for his life. And he said, my body was broken. My mind was in despair. I was depressed. I was upset. And I couldn't believe that this is what Jesus wanted for me. And it was in that moment when I was at my weakest, lowest moment that God spoke shalom, peace, wholeness in my
Hmm.
life. And he said, I was made whole in that moment in my relationship with God, in my body, my mind, not because I was well and wealthy, but because I was dependent and surrendered. And that's
Yeah.
where I
mm.
think when you only focus on resurrection, you miss that the shalom of God that shows up when you have cancer, when you've lost a child, when horrible things happen.
Yeah. So good.
You keep going through this book, and you kind of get through traditional leadership needs reframed by kind of taking a second look at them, maybe examination, uh, kind of just regurgitating like the way we've thought about them versus what's reality compared to the picture of the Bible and what it says about them. And with that, you go through power, ego, speed, performance, perfection, loyalty, and scale. And I think it'd be good to work through a little bit of those, one at a time. So the
Mm-hmm.
first one is power. What's a
Mm.
better view?
A better view is not power hoarded, but power distributed. So you probably heard me trying to wrestle and walk a very important thin line in that chapter.
Hmm.
On
Yeah.
the one hand, all of us are empowered. I say that specifically to people who have felt they have been powerless, people who have felt powerless in society, on the job, in their families, in their roles, specifically women, specifically people of color who have felt
Yeah.
like I have been deprived of a certain power that's been invested in me. And so the message is God has given you power. All of
Yeah.
us, every single one of us. At the same time, understanding where your power base lies is key to knowing how to maximize that power. So that's when I go through talking about the various power bases and whether you have positional power or referential power, or
Mm,
even if you have coercive power. God has given you a power, and your question isn't, Lord, how do I maximize this power to become more powerful? The question is, how do I use this power to both empower others and to glorify you? And I think that's where we miss it with power. God didn't give you power to make you feel powerful. God gave you power so that you can empower others and glorify Him. And
yeah.
that's where I'm hoping leaders would land.
Yeah, that's so good. That was one part that really stuck out to me in the book was that section on power. I mean, it just kind of seems right now with even the political climate that we're in, the
Yes.
church is trying to hoard power,
Yes.
take it away from others, not
Yes.
use it in a way that blesses the least of these.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a
But
lot of
yeah,
hands-on stuff here too. I like the way that you surrendered in terms
Mm,
of like will and words and things like that, because
yes.
I think most people in positions of power don't want to look at themselves as surrendering to somebody in the
Yes.
hierarchical scheme of things. And I mean, you kind of reverse that and say it's actually strength in the
Yes.
power by the way you lead. And I think that is such a leading from underneath sacrificial
Yes.
Jesus principle. Yet
Yes.
you are so right that like in our Christian businesses, even in the church, like we just don't think that way. So it
No.
needs to be reclaimed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So let's move on to talk about ego a little bit. I also really love this chapter of how you reframe
Yeah.
that. In the book, you kind of walk through how to transform the view on this from self-centeredness, which is usually the mindset of ego, is me, myself, and I,
Yeah. Yeah.
into
Das Ich,
divine
is that the
love.
German? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So me, myself, and I, the I-centered version into divine love. So
Yeah.
speak to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, in the ego part, I felt it really important to name worldviews as a means of understanding your ego because there are certain people I will talk to, certain friends of mine, for example, friends whose parents were immigrants to this country, they may say, it is totally inappropriate for me to ever talk about myself, ever. If I talk about myself, it's shameful. If I see myself as somebody, it's a shameful thing. I have other friends, in Africa and Kenya who would say, well, if I overinflate myself, I would do damage not just on myself, but the generations following. So for us to write this kind of very American principle of either lower your ego or inflate your ego would miss the whole point. And this again is the Jesus principle. He contextualizes his message. It's the same message, but he speaks it to us in a way that we can hear. So to some people in leadership positions, they need to be told, dude, remember who you are. Walk like you are in charge. Act like you know what to do. And to others, they need to be told, calm that down. Like,
Yeah.
please, your head is taking up all the space. And I believe the only way you can do that is leading through the love of God. Only the
Yeah.
love of God can center you so well on the potter's wheel that you're not flopping over on the side of underrepresenting yourself or overinflating your view.
Yeah.
But if I know that I'm loved, then I know I don't have anything to prove. And I know I don't have anything to worry about because I'm
Yeah.
anchored in his love, and that's what matters.
Mm.
Yeah. So good. The next session I'm going to say was written just for me, I think. I think you must have pulled that one out there and read my card and wrote me a chapter. It's called Crucifying Speed. My whole life I have
Yeah.
been a ADD child, and the
Yeah.
world would say like, it's a curse, you need help, you need this. I've actually found it the other way. Like it's been like it's kind of that blessing curse,
Yes.
contronym in the Bible. Like I found God's blessed it over and over and over. And
Yeah. Yeah.
one of the reasons is because I accomplish way more than anybody else can in a day. Like my
Yes.
speed is way faster than anybody else's, but that has gotten me into a lot of problems over time,
Yeah.
especially Matt's going to laugh at this, but I don't even really call myself a pastor. I actually lead
Mm,
a church collective called Tove here.
wow.
I disciple like crazy. I've got about a dozen guys I meet with regularly. Like
Wow.
in this sense, like you would say, of course you're a pastor, but like I don't
Yeah.
even like to call myself that because I struggle with giving people real time.
Mm,
You said a few minutes ago, Jesus would have slowed down and had
yeah.
every one of those conversations.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yesterday we're getting ready. Matt's coming to play at our opening night, and so I'm getting all our outdoor stage ready and all
Yeah.
this, and I'm doing this, and I
Yeah.
got a guy there helping me, and I am just running circles around him, and he's trying to like talk about his kids and his family, and I'm just the get it done Martha, right
Yeah.
here, and
Yeah.
like I have to say, like in the heat of the moment yesterday, I remembered these pages that I had read a few days
Wow.
before, and I stopped and squared up with them, looked in the eye, and like thought to myself, I need to give this guy some time right now.
Wow. Well, as one recovering Martha to another, we will always need to hear those moments when Jesus is like, Will, Nicole. And
Right.
we confuse speed and productivity all the time. I think, if I can get 15 things done in an hour, then I will be so productive. But
Yep.
when you look at the gospel ministry of Jesus, his productivity is exponential. And it's not because he filled every second with a thing, it's because he was attentive to God's timing. And this is where I'm trying to discipline my mind. Again, I am still struggling with every single one of these principles. This is not written from a place of overcoming. It is
So I'm
written
not the
from
only one. That's nice to hear.
no,
Thank you.
not at all.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to remind myself the God I serve is able to redeem the years the locust has eaten. So if he's taking too long, he can redeem the time. And the God I serve is able to do suddenly, in a moment, in a twinkling of an eye, what
Yes.
none of us could expect or prepare for. So he's able to move fast when he wants, he's able to move slow when he wants. So my discipline is, Lord, help me to get on your time. Help me not to
Mm,
Uh-huh.
stay on my watch because I
yeah.
know I have 18 things to do before the kids go to bed, but help me to get on your time, which might mean I've actually sat and colored with them when I should have been washing the dishes, and God will
Mm,
redeem that time in
yeah.
Jesus' name.
So I love
Amen.
how at the end you just bullet point this. Maybe again,
Yeah,
that's a product of my ADD. I just love the
yeah.
bullet points. But you have one bullet point here that is reclaim the sacramental slow.
Oh,
And when a lot of people get the word sacrament, they immediately go to like,
yeah.
Catholicism,
Yes, yes,
Orthodoxy, things like that,
yes,
which we love some of that.
yes.
But you're honing in on sacred space, and that's what I
Yes.
really like. Even though, I mean, this is like in the book, it's like this tiny little paragraph, but there's so
Yeah.
much of this that's really powerful. And again, this is sort of my chapter of the book, but there
Mm,
are several of those paragraphs that like, I think would be good in like black and white cards to like leave
yes.
post-its around the house, and this
Yes.
was really one of them. But all of those bullet points at the end I felt like were really hands-on, really
Yeah.
really good. Like here's how you get back.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so
Mm,
good. The next chapter or the next thing that you talk about in this is performance.
mm,
And in the world, transactional performance really seems to take precedence
yeah.
over relationships. I mean, I've even seen this in my
Mm-hmm.
own life. Before I was in full-time ministry, I worked for a major retail drug company as a store
Mm-hmm.
manager, and like it was all about performance rather than relationships, and
Absolutely.
that's just the speed of our
Yeah.
world. And
Yeah.
even that is, as you talked about, the dangers of those things of the world seeping into the church.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in this chapter, you advocate for a presence-based relationships over
Yeah.
performance-based leadership. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I was really careful on the performance chapter not to insinuate that as long as someone is present with you, then you can handle poor
Hmm.
performance.
Yeah.
We all want high performing teams. We all want to do well. But if we're not careful, an overemphasis on performance does take away from a person's presence. And I see this most when people are dealing with life issues. I had a colleague on my team, high performer, always does well, reached out and said, my mom died. I'm going to need to take one day. And I thought to myself, there are some deadlines that we had to finish. There were some meetings that I really needed his presence in. If I had emphasized performance, I would have said, take a day, look forward to seeing you tomorrow because we got a really big meeting on the line and I'm glad you're going to be there. But if I pay attention to the whole person, then my response is, I'm so sorry to hear that your mom passed.
Yeah.
Please take the time that you need to care for your soul and to be present with your family at the expense of your performance. Another place where that shows up, and I was trying to kind of give some real time examples in performance reviews. We're always in a performance review asking, how many did you sell? How much did you do? What was your quantitative performance? But if we can shape our values to line up with who we serve and who we are, then I can evaluate how well did you take your vacation days?
Yeah.
Because taking your vacation days ought to be a marker of how well you're doing
Hmm.
as a person, not just how well you're showing up. And if I'm
Or even
really
if you
good at
took
this,
them.
if you
Yeah,
took them,
right.
thank you.
Yeah.
You should
So.
not take vacation days. How well did you practice integrity, even if it meant you had to come back to me, your boss, and say, look, I know where you're going, but the decision you're making is not wise. So,
Yeah.
how do we create spaces for people to show up as their full selves? I think that's what questions we need to be asking.
Yeah,
Mm,
my wife
good.
makes me take all my vacation days. So,
Yes. Thank
so
God for
yeah,
your wife.
yes, I need her in my life because
That's
if it
great.
was up to me, I would just keep going, going, going. So
Yeah.
this chapter is all about me, like
Yeah.
the whole like performance thing. I'm recovering perfectionist, I guess you could say,
Yes.
in that
Yes.
kind of way, which
Absolutely.
kind of is that next chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You'll find this interesting too on that note. I used to be again, I that busy chapter thing, but the whole book really applies here. I was in the ministry at a traditional churches. I've church planted a couple of them and
Yeah.
found myself so busy I didn't have time to actually minister. And so about
Mm,
8 years ago, I just kind of we made a decision at our house like we just weren't going to do that, and I stepped
yeah.
out of it and I just
Yeah.
said I'm going to wake up every morning and say, Lord, what do you have for me today?
Mm,
And that turned into a whole bunch of crazy things, working at
mm,
a seminary and opening different a new church launch, very different than anything we've
wow.
ever been involved with before, and like just all kinds of things, actually discipling people the way that Jesus discipled people.
Yes.
Lots of these principles in the book, and the one that I think really like helped me the most 8 years ago when I just said, this is what I'm going to do. I had no idea how I was going to get paid or how we were going to survive
Hmm.
or anything like that. We just said, God, we're just going to follow you. We're going to go after you.
Yeah.
And part of it was I had a poor understanding of perfection. And you already keyed in on
Mm,
this once, is that
yeah.
wholeness is better. So in the New Testament,
Yes.
theologically, when you say be perfect as Jesus is perfect,
Yes.
like we get really off on that in our
Yes.
culture. Like we
Yes, we
think that
do.
Jesus wants us to do everything exactly perfectly, where what it meant was you align this with a shalom kind of wholeness. And
Yes.
I've got a great article. Some of you X44s, if you're interested, just go to Expedition 44 and in the search box, type in wholeness or shalom, and you can see this article that really expounds on this. But this book has it's a great chapter on
Mm,
perfection. I mean,
mm,
you come right off and started off with this seduction of perfection, and like
yes.
the wording of that is just in our culture that
Mm,
just hits it on the head. And then
yeah.
a couple pages later, the heading is perfect casualties. And I think that one really hits it too. And then you
Hmm.
you kind of finish with perfect union. And I
Yeah.
love the way that you kind of walk through some problems to showing us a better picture of what
Yeah.
perfection, if you want to use that term, looks
Right.
like. Can you just kind of work through this for us?
Yeah. The perfection portion of our society is really, really dangerous. I talk about how there's a self-oriented perfection. Some people are just born with a standard that they believe exists. It's this kind of inner drive, and they're in a room by themselves, and they just have to keep doing and doing and doing until they get it right. And then we applaud people
Yeah.
like that because they become first chair in the orchestra, because they become, the best sports players. We applaud that type of perfectionism. And then we have the other centered perfectionism that's from somebody else. It's like, you got to do better. It's a parent, it's a guardian, it's a teacher. Why'd you get a B? You should have gotten an A. And then we start to
Mm.
internalize that. But I think the most dangerous part is the societal sense of perfection, where there's always a view of somebody out there doing it better than you, and they become your aim, your marker. I have
Yeah.
to be as good as them, I have to do as much as them. And all the while, it's tearing away at
Mm.
what Jesus really meant. I'm so glad you've
Yep.
written about this, Will, because Jesus did not mean be perfect in your execution. He meant be
Right.
perfect in your union. Be perfectly connected
Mm.
to me as I am perfectly connected with the Father. And that changes how you pray. Not, Lord, help me to
Yep.
get it right, but Lord, help me to stay in right relationship with you. Help me to be so tethered to you that what people see is you and not me, my achievements,
Yep.
my goals. And that again allows us to kind of tear down the influences we've accepted from the world. I still struggle with this because I feel like, oh, there is such a thing called perfect. And I need the Lord to tell me, no, there's not. The
Yeah,
only
right.
perfect is me. And stick with me and I will take care of you.
Yes,
My
yes.
grace
Keep
is
going, keep
more
going.
than
Now you're
sufficient.
preaching. Go ahead. You got you Go
Oh my
for it. We love it.
gosh. Because
You're
when
in
you're
the right
striving for
room.
perfection,
Yeah.
then you never really experience grace. And we
Yeah.
need the grace of God.
Mm,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so good. Love
At
it.
the end of this, in the same sense of the last chapter, you kind of this time you do it with numbers, but it says as we process this transition from earthly perfection to divine union, here are 4 questions that might help. And I just love the way that you kind of coax people into the career coaching aspect of this, of like, come on,
Mm.
you can do it a little bit. And so
Mhm.
the questions here are, what are you afraid of? And I think that is just such a
Mhm.
divine question. Is the
Yes.
culture we live in, like, seems like everybody's afraid of something and has to be talked down off that ledge a little bit.
Yes.
And so the First Peter 5:7 paragraph, there's
Yes.
really a great way to do that. What does it look like to confess your imperfection? Again, going back to
Mhm.
self humility of Jesus. I love that,
Yes.
taking it back. Who can invite you on this journey, and how
Mm.
can you take the first step? And you go
Mm.
right into that as recovering perfectionist. And we've used that words a couple of
Yeah.
times, but it is so true that this is a process, and it's
Yes.
Mm,
something that might take being bathed in prayer, getting
Yes.
your accountability partners to intercede on your
Yes.
behalf. Like,
Yes.
I
mhm.
truly believe that Jesus can heal these things like in an
Amen.
instant,
Amen.
but I haven't figured out when he does that in an instance and when it takes 3 years of every day on your knees, you know?
So true.
And so it's still, the book is a great map to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah. So the next thing you tackle is loyalty. I think this is a major thing in the church, and the cultures within a lot of our
Yes.
evangelical churches have this loyalty culture. I know Dr. Scott McKnight deals with it a lot in a church
Yes.
called
Yep.
Tove.
Yes, he does.
Majorly, it was yeah. There's sometimes these pastors out there, these leaders that demand absolute,
Yep.
loyalty, which
Mm-hmm.
is more about uniformity than about
Mm-hmm.
unity. And
Mm-hmm.
you work through this chapter to present, I guess, contrast loyalty with unity.
Yeah.
Talk with us a little bit through that. I thought this was an awesome chapter, and a chapter that I think so many church leadership teams need to hear.
Yeah. I love Scott McKnight's reference because I love his book and I think he really unpacks it well.
Yep.
If you listen to The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill from
Hmm.
CT, you'll also see some of this. So when you think through like the prototype of a Mark Driscoll type, loyalty doesn't just happen because people show up and want to serve. Loyalty happens because the pastor or the leader has done something for them. So
Yeah.
it's he showed up for me in the middle of my divorce. I had no place to go. He was there. He prayed. He cared for me. And then when he starts to go wrong or when he starts to sin, the obligation isn't, I need to just cover him. It's also, I need to protect him because he was there for me. I need to do, it's very transactional, this type of
Yeah,
loyalty.
it's like
He
scratch
was
my
there
back,
for
you
me.
scratch yours.
Yes,
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
right. And manipulative leaders will do that on purpose. They will, dust you off. They'll see the most vulnerable. They'll
Yep.
provide for the most vulnerable because the expectation is, I've covered for you. Now you cover for me. And it doesn't just hurt the leader or the people, it hurts the whole church
Yes.
when nobody has
Absolutely.
room to say, I don't agree. I think
Mm,
Yep.
we need to do something different. And I'm not suggesting that leadership is a full on democracy and everybody gets to, be insubordinate. I am suggesting there has to be room for people to
Yes.
say, I think we might want to consider something else. And for the leader to at least hear, acknowledge, and then not blacklist that person because, oh, you're the
yeah.
dissenter. The meeting after the meeting, Bob's
Mm,
the dissenter. Get him out and don't get him close to me again because he's never going to agree. That's the society we live
Yeah.
in,
yeah.
unfortunately.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So true.
we've done quite a few videos on some of that. We did a several part series on Ravi Zacharias
Yeah.
and sort of his fall. And I mean, I think so much of what you wrote in this book reminded me of all of these things, just the
Yes.
falls after the
Yes.
falls after the falls. And but it's not just that, it's so much more than that too.
Yeah.
It's day to day, you know, Christianity leadership basis that really needs to like be transformed. I don't know how else to
Yes.
say it. They just need
Yes.
more Jesus in their life. And I think
Yes.
that you did a great job of like really
Hmm.
demonstrating that throughout the textures of the pages there.
Yeah. Thank
Hmm.
you.
Your next one is crucifying scale, and it's
Mm.
talking about growth.
Yes.
You go through a lot of different things here, but this is a little controversial in that every
Mm-hmm.
church, like, they think they're doing discipleship, but what is really communicated is that they're more important or more concerned really about growth and numbers than anything else.
Yep.
The next planning, it looks really good to have, organizational structure for knowing, a really good church never stops building. You hear that all the time,
Yes.
like
Yes.
we started, the first one is 2 million, 4 million. Now we're doing a,
That's
18
right.
million dollar this, and like it sounds really good to
That's
people
right.
until you get back to Jesus and you go,
Mm-hmm.
the picture we read doesn't really look anything like that, and
Mm-hmm.
so when you bring it back to Jesus, that growth looks a lot more like discipleship and really like in depth, deep growth with your missional
Yes.
people than it does
Yes.
anything else. Are you
Absolutely.
growing the people, or are you growing the numbers of everything else? And the world
That's it.
likes those numbers.
Yes, they do.
I can't say it as well as you do though. So share a little bit about what's going on in these pages.
Yeah, there was a season in my life where I felt like every other conversation was better, faster, cheaper. If your
Yeah.
service is doing great, you need to add another service. If your church is growing, you need to plant another church. I had a friend who had a coffee business and she loved roasting beans just at home. And so people were like, "Oh, you roasting beans?" And so she started giving them out as Christmas gifts. So everybody was like, "Oh, since you gave me as a Christmas gift, I think I want to give some for my graduation gift." And so people were demanding that she grow. So she did. She started selling her coffee beans to different coffee sourcers. And she was working with all the local coffee shops. She burned herself out. Woke up one morning and was like, how did I even get here? She lost what she loved because she thought the only way to treat something that's good is to go wide instead of deep. She started losing quality. She started losing control over packaging. And it was after that moment that she said, I'm going to go back to doing what I know I want to do. I want to roast coffee for myself and my friends. And she went back to that and found so much peace. I feel
Mm.
like the church in many ways is that coffee roaster. We have this demand that we have to be the exponential gospel. We only want to be the Acts 2 version of the gospel. We don't
Yeah.
want to be the John 20 version of the gospel or the John 19 version of the gospel. The John 19 version of the gospel is everybody left him. The Acts 2 version of the gospel is thousands were added. But the question is, where is God's calling for your mission? If God
Yeah.
only called you to disciple those 30 people for the rest of your life, would that be enough? Or would you always think you failed because you didn't do another service and didn't expand the 30 to go get 35 more? And again, this is the challenge and the tension. I'm not saying that growth is bad, and I'm not saying the scale is bad, but not everything has to grow exponentially externally. As you said, Will, I think the deepest impact and growth happens internally, and sometimes
Yeah.
that's the growth we don't see.
Yeah.
When I was a young youth pastor, I went to Moody Bible Institute in
Mm,
Chicago, and I was able to I love to joke about this. I dated Bill Hybels' niece or something like that.
nice.
And so I got to go to Willow Creek, and he said, "Hey, we want you to come work here." So I jumped on board and worked at Willow for quite a while when I was
Wow.
young. And then I got hired at this new church plant, and the plan was like numbers, numbers, numbers,
Yeah.
growth, 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 and I remember sitting in this meeting with this, we were not even a year into this ministry, and I remember sitting with the guy that was started it, and I'm going, what does success look like? And he says things like, well, we're not really into numbers, there's a lot more into that, but, and then he goes on for a half hour about the numbers, and
Yeah.
the end of it was, if your ministry is going to look successful after a year, you should have 100 kids in this youth group, and that
Yeah.
was it, and
Yep.
so now I was a get it done, go after it, move up the corporate ladder. And so after a year, I had 400 kids in our youth ministry.
Wow.
We didn't fit in the space. We had to go to the YMCA and like rent out the YMCA one night a week. I mean, it was nuts. And we did this for a while. And then there were some shifts in that ministry. A lot of the stuff you said going on in this book, we experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And I went from the 400 kids to rounding up our 30 staff uh, people and said, this just isn't working. Like we're just not having the kind of growth that Jesus, describes.
Yeah.
Let's really like go after one or two kids. So let's make it
Yes.
our mission to like each one of us go after. Some of them quit. I'll just say like that wasn't
Mm-hmm.
their model. They went and joined the next big numbers thing.
Mm-hmm.
But after a year, we went from 400 kids to 40 kids. And now 25 years later, almost every one of those 40 kids is in ministry somewhere.
Wow.
I mean,
Wow.
like it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
blows me away. And
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
love this chapter and some of these things. And again, at the end of this, you talk about greed. The part on greed is, oh, that's so good, by
Mm,
the way. But
mm,
you get to the end and you got your kind of 6 points at the end. And again, those are really, really just great points. I want to emphasize we've tracked to a lot of people, but so many people I know, they'll buy a book and they don't really read it. They sort of
yeah.
speed read it.
Yeah.
And I just want to put this out there. If that's who you are, if that's what you do, you should still buy this book. You should buy the book and you should at least like read the bullet points at the end of each chapter. Because
Yeah.
if that's all you read, your life would be transformed.
Wow. I love it. Mine too. My
Yeah.
life is transformed writing it. Yes.
hmm Um, so as we kind of start wrapping up here, the last part of your book, part three, is really you title it "The Promise,"
Yeah.
and you're kind of looking at the fruit of leading in a more Christ-like, Christiform way. Um, what does this look like? Talk to us a bit
Mm.
about that.
At its core, I mean, I think it looks like a life that is fully surrendered and dependent on Christ. And that is not a day by day thing, that's a second by second thing. It is a pausing almost every second with every breath. Lord, lead me. Lord, show me. Lord,
Yeah.
guide me. And then it's trusting after I've prayed and asked that God will lead and God will guide and God will also correct. So there are several biblical examples that I gave, but I mean, the Bible is full of people having to surrender. The ultimate understanding of the cross isn't just that Jesus died for us, it's that he surrendered it all on the cross. He who had everything and was everything surrendered it all unto death. So I would say that the resurrected version of our lives isn't that we don't have power, it's that we surrender that power. It's not that we're
Yeah.
no longer struggling with perfectionism, it's that we know how to lay it down now. It's that we know how to lay down scale and speed and loyalty, and we see it when it crops up so that we can identify it and lay it down. And what that does, the more we lay it down and surrender these things, is the more we can build teams who know how to do the same thing. Because the true evidence of surrender is other people around me, even my kids, my family members, those who know me well. When they see me trying to figure it out by surrender, then prayerfully they will learn how to surrender it all as well.
Yeah.
hmm It's so good. We were talking before the show today as we were talking and we kind of started our episode this way. Like at first we didn't think this book was going to be necessarily our cup of tea. We do a lot of like exegesis talk with obviously you have great credentials and all of that. Like we talk with like the John Waltons and
Yeah.
David De Silvas and all the
Yes.
those like are more of the flavor of our show.
Yes.
But like we also have like this cruciform bent to like all of our episodes, and that's what really
Yeah.
resonated with us in this book. So maybe before we kind of like get to the end, what though this is a book on leadership, and sometimes that's a four-letter word in like our
Yeah.
scholarly circles, like, but
Yes.
I mean, it's a
Yes.
big thing. Like, I think you're melding like that view of like sometimes the academy and
Yes.
the leadership view of the world like together
Yeah.
in such an amazing way. And this book really isn't just a leadership book; it's a theology of the cross. So,
Amen.
could you just expand on that a little bit before we
Can
wrap
I
up?
dive
Of
in real quick too?
yeah,
Yeah.
yep,
Matt and I are different than most theologians. I'll remind everybody that Matt and I are theologians at heart, but we're both fully involved in ministry, which is strange for
Yeah.
theologians. Like
Yes.
I'm not sure I know two other guys like Matt and I, and like our life is really into ministry,
Yeah.
but it's sort of, the way that we've gotten there is through exegesis of the Bible, of saying, what does it look like? How did we get this far off track? And I think a lot of what you're doing here, why it resonates with us so much, is because most of this book, the heart of it is to get people on a better track for Christiformity. And again,
Yes.
like, it seems like that's very countercultural to where
Yes.
everybody's going right now.
Yes,
Everybody's
it
going
is.
this way, and you're saying, no, we got to get back, we got to go
Yeah.
this way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It does feel like that in our society, that even people in the church are saying, "Come on, let's go up, up, up." But the calling of Christ is, "No, let's go down, down, down. Let's go
Yes,
deep,
Mm,
yes,
deep, deep."
yeah.
We have to, almost as believers, be the first responder. Kind of muscle in us has to be activated.
yeah,
When the world is on fire and everyone runs away, we need to be the ones running into it, not because we're martyrs, but because we know when you go through the valley of crucifixion to become
mhm,
like Christ, when you become close to Christ through the fellowship of his sufferings, then you can glory in resurrection. And I think
Mm,
the message is, there is so much glory in resurrection, but you'll never fully get it and understand it until you've gone through the valley. It's like my
yeah.
mom
yeah,
telling me, when I was younger, she's like, "You'll never know how much I sacrificed for you until you have your own kids, but I do it in a second." And as a kid, I was like,
yes,
"Yeah, whatever." Then I have my kids and I call my mom. I'm like, "You sacrificed so much for me." But I would never know the glory of this stage of parenthood if I hadn't gone through the suffering and the hardship. That's what I hope Christians
yeah,
understand. The glory of resurrection comes because of the cross,
yeah,
not just in spite of it. Like, the
yeah,
cross is a part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ.
Mm,
And the one who died for you doesn't want you to gloss over that. He wants you to walk next to the cross. He wants you to embrace the cross. He wants you to hold on to the cross, because then when we get to resurrection glory, we will all realize what this is really about.
amen. That's
so you
awesome.
talked
Amen.
about your kids a little bit, and the last part of here, the epilogue of your book, is a letter to our children. And
Yeah.
so Matt and I firmly believe that our first and foremost calling is to raise up our children, that we
Yeah.
disciple our children before we can go disciple anybody else. So I love that you've done this. I've been doing for years a what I call a legacy 25 list that changes
Oh,
like every
wow.
day, that I have 25 points of like, what am I really trying to
Mm,
instill in my kids? What am I
mm,
teaching them on a
mm,
regular basis? What am I doing? All these principles of your book of
mm,
stopping and, like, strategically saying, hey, have we ever talked about this? Do you know that this is like, when I do
yeah.
this, this is why, this is the thoughts behind it, what's shaping it.
Yeah.
We've got four boys. We homeschool them through eighth
Mm,
grade, then send them to a local Christian school. And like,
wow.
they get tired of seeing my wife and I there, because we're like, all right, we're not done. We're still
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And so I love this last page that you put in here about, like, kind of a letter to your kids of how you
Mm,
see them. And it ends by saying, I see you fully, I see you fully leading, I see you fully leading now by the power of God. And
mm,
it's so neat. So I see
yeah.
what you want
Yes.
your kids to take away. What's the heart of what's a home run grand slam with, if you could just wave the magic spiritual wand and everybody that touches this book gets it, what would it be?
Oh, I think it would just be a holy release, a holy divine surrender. That last part, I was actually thinking of that refrain in First John when he's like, "I write to you, fathers, because of this. I write to you, young people, because of
Mhm.
this. I write
Mm,
to you," and so it's like that constant refrain: "I write to you. I write to you." I think it by the end, I was thinking, "I write to you because I want you to not get swept up in the values of the world. I want you to be willing to risk it all, everything,
Yeah.
to risk it all."
mm,
Because I have seen, if you're really willing to surrender, what you receive from Christ as a result of that surrender is incomparable. There's nothing in this world that compares to the glory of God that comes from our full surrender. So that would be my magic wand. Other than the fact that we could fly, I'd love for everyone to be able to fly. That'd be great. Because then I might never be late because I fly really fast. But other than that, I would want people to just say, "I surrender all. I
Mm,
surrender."
amen. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been an awesome conversation. We've loved it. I really pray that, especially if you're a church leader or you even buy it for your pastor, by nailed it. Yeah, Dr. Nicole, it's been an honor, privilege of ours to talk with you today about your book. Um, any closing thoughts or how people can maybe keep up with you and your works and what's going on?
Sure. I am on, for better or worse, I'm on social media. We should write a whole thing about the dangers
Oh
of
yeah.
social media, but I'm Dr. Nicole M. Martin on social media, and I've got a website, NicoleMassieMartin.com. Follow Jesus. Let's follow Jesus together. That's where you'll find me. You'll find me following Jesus prayerfully.
Cool.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Martin. May God bless you and keep you.
Thank you guys. Thank you.